Today on The Rundown, we're breaking down the latest in tech news and taking a deep dive into the impact of technology on the modern workplace. From AI and automation to remote work and digital collaboration, we're exploring how innovation is reshaping how we work, how we connect, and how we thrive professionally. Let's get going. Welcome to The Rundown. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Rundown. Today is January the 23rd, Thursday, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you, especially with my esteemed panel, starting with Tamra. How are you, Tamra?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are things faring out with you? This is our weekly check-in with you about how things are going.
Weekly
out there
check-in.
in California.
We've had a couple new ones pop up, and then we've had some that are starting to die down, and so we're really moving into that recovery phase.
Thank goodness. Good to hear it. I'm glad. And we also have here Miss Lois. Hello, Lois.
Hello.
How are you?
I am pleased to tell you that I am still alive, and I have just had my 75th birthday, if you can believe that. I can't.
Bravo.
And
gosh.
there's a lot of people in my family that didn't make it to 75, so I'm very happy.
Lois, happy birthday. That's
Thank
so
you.
wonderful. What a
We
blessing.
love this.
What a blessing. And right next to her, we have Dave Troutman. How are you, Dave?
It's nice to see you, Lois. Great. You look great. I just turned 70, so we're all celebrating here. My dad never expected to live past 65. He made it to 86. My job is to get past that number, so
Past
we'll see
86.
how I do.
In Hebrew, we say ad me'ah ve'esrim, until 120. So,
Really?
yep,
I love it.
120. And look at this, my friends. Bill Davis. Hello, sir.
Who? Where? What?
Right there. Turn around. How are you, Bill?
I'm fine, David. How are you?
I'm great. It's such a joy to have you here. I'm really honored, and thank you for being a part of this tonight. I'm really excited.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I watched the show last week, and I thought, this looks like a lot of fun. Let's go see what it's really like. And
Yeah,
so
we
here
get to
I am.
invade his office now, yeah.
That's right. It absolutely is.
I have to tell you, my mom made it to 100.
Oh, cool.
She's been gone now for about 10 years, but it was really interesting. And my dad died relatively young in his life, so I have no idea what's in my future.
There you go.
One of the two. You know what? Let's hope it's the mom.
I get tomorrow, I'm fine.
Okay,
Just
there you
keep
go.
getting tomorrows.
That's
Well,
my
we have
philosophy.
no time to waste. Let's get right to the news. We have some exciting breaking news. Just today, OpenAI made what I think is a pretty significant announcement. So they said that they are starting a new, program or aspect of OpenAI called Operator. And this is what they are claiming is, at least in the ChatGPT world, in the OpenAI world, the first AI agent that can actually do stuff for you. So you can see here, it's find me a friendly campsite at Joshua Tree this weekend. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull up a browser within ChatGPT. It's going to do all of this right in front of you. So it's navigating, it's entering Joshua Tree for search. It chooses the dates because you said, I'd like it for this day. And it then can book it right like that. This
That's
is
The
pretty
travel
scary.
agents are
this is
all
kind of
going nuts.
It's kind of wild.
I don't want ChatGPT to have my credit card like that.
Well, no, you have to say
I don't want ChatGPT to have my credit card that way.
no, but you have to say if you
already got
noticed, it stopped right before the book it, right? You have to say the book it. But
Okay.
what's different about this is what it's doing is it's we've already talked about how AI can look at your screen if you give it permission, how AI can use your camera if you give it permission, it can listen if you give it permission. what this is doing now is it's taking its reasoning, and it's adding the action piece, which is up until now what we've had to do in order to get actions is we've had to use something like IFTTT. Is that what it is? Yeah, if this then that.
Yeah.
Right? IFTTT. You'd have to sort of do some basic programming and use OpenAI tokens. You'd have to pay for tokens. Now, that's all the good news. The bad news is it's only available right now in the Pro plan, which is $200 a month.
I was going to ask what the business model is, and there it is right there.
Yeah. So
I could buy a car for that.
For $200, I think I'll schedule my own vacation.
right.
I could like get in the car and go do things because I don't ask it to tell me what to do.
Oh my God, Lois, that was the best line. I'll just schedule my own.
I would love a different example. Because like I'm a researcher, so the part of vacation for me, like the planning to me is just as much fun. So
on the OpenAI YouTube channel,
I certainly wouldn't pay $200 for that.
On the OpenAI YouTube channel, they put up about a 25-minute video under explaining all this, unpacking it. We're not going to talk about it now. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. It literally just happened today at 2:20. By the way, Bill, the business model here for them is they have these 3 tiers. They've got the free, they've got the plus, which is $20 a month, which basically gives you early access. It gives you better models, gives you more searches, things like that. And then they've got
the subscription model writ large and expensive.
And by the way, the Wall Street Journal this past week, was it Joanna Stern? I'm forgetting her. I think it was Joanna.
Yeah, Joanne Stern, yeah.
Interviewed a whole bunch of these tech leaders, and it was the product guy from OpenAI, someone from Perplexity, I think. Really fascinating discussions. But with the OpenAI gentleman, they talked a little bit about the model and the pricing, the business here. And one of the things that he said is that GPT 4.0, I'm sorry, maybe it was 01, whatever, one of the newer models is 1,000 times less expensive to create than GPT-3. That the price, we have this strange thing now where the quality is getting so much better and the cost is actually coming way, way down. And so I think it's fair to say that we will probably see changes to this $200 a month or whatever in the not so distant future. But for right now, if you want to play with agent or operator, as they call it, you'll have to go over there.
I was watching somebody talk about the cost of data centers and how we do not have anywhere close to enough data centers. And they were looking at downstream and saying, the amount of investment that's going to be required to process all this AI stuff in the world is astronomical. And they're really worried that this thing is going to outrun the capacity to run these models the way that people will want to use them. That, to me, is fascinating.
So wait until
the last time we brought this forward,
wait until we get to
Dave.
Wait until we get to Stargate, Bill, because that's exactly what Stargate is all about. That's that news story. Sorry, right. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that's the investment side.
Yeah,
for me. Functionally, it's an interesting demo, but I can't see where I'm going to apply it unless I am employing 25 people and I want them all to use it. So I think, you could,
right.
What do they call it? Amortize that into the cost of business. And if it give you results that turn profits and give you an advantage on, marketing and corporation, well then, yeah, go for it.
But
I don't think for the individual, what am I going to ask it to do that is so blazingly important?
Get Taylor Swift tickets.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding.
When you have 500,000 people asking the same AI to get Taylor Swift tickets.
I'm not even kidding. I mean, we sit there and we, press the button incessantly until
please
let AI
log me in. Let me do something.
So you have someone automatically pressing the button for you.
Exactly.
You have 1,000 bots trying to get you, in this second, trying to get you tickets.
I was like, the bots are doing it now.
Right. That's the problem right there.
But this is
it's just not our bots.
1,000 bots.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, my friends, we're pushing forward.
We're
moving on to CapCut and edits. So for those of you.
What is CapCut?
I'm going to tell you. So
Oh, good.
so
It's the
glad. Yes.
TikTok editor
So-
in a breath.
Last weekend, it was a very interesting weekend in the tech world, in the TikTok world particularly. Saturday night at what, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, maybe even a little earlier, TikTok.
It was like early because
Was
it
it?
was like
Yeah.
6:30 my time.
TikTok turned off.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
turned off.
Shut
We
it
opened
down.
the app
Shut down.
and it just shut down. And then
I imagine a big knife switch and somebody's like,
and then a few hours later,
Blackout time.
it was right back again. It was and no one, and both, well, I'm not going to get into the politics, but both times there was Donald Trump's name was front and center on what TikTok had to say about why it was doing what it was doing. In any case, CapCut is one of these social media video editing tools. So you kind of dump a video into it, and then using AI and CapCut's own technologies, it will slice it up and it will add captions and stuff like that. CapCut is also owned by ByteDance. So CapCut was also shut down. It is also back now. But there are two pieces to these companies. One is whether those of us who've already downloaded them, can access them. We can. But if you want to now go to the Apple Store or the Google Store and download it, you can't. And that's because Apple and Google are still afraid that they're going to get fined I think it's like $5,000 per instance of anyone touching the app. And so they have not put them back in the App Store. So CapCut is still not available for download. As soon as CapCut disappeared, Facebook, or Meta, announced that they will be releasing something called Edits, which will be a direct competitor to CapCut's. Now, between you and me, I don't care about CapCut. I don't care about Edits. What's interesting to me about this is this big company, and this sort of gets to our larger conversation, wanting to come in and eat up this smaller app, CapCut, which we've seen a gazillion times before. Go ahead, Lois.
So I'm confused. I know that there was a law passed that TikTok had to divest, and it didn't, so it had to shut down. But CapCut isn't TikTok?
No, but it's
Yes,
they're both owned by ByteDance.
it's owned by
It's owned
ByteDance.
by
No,
the same
it didn't.
company.
Owned by the same
The law
Chinese
didn't
company.
say this company has to divest. It said this.
So it
TikTok.
does, though, because the law actually isn't, it's called the TikTok law, but it's actually not about TikTok. It is about companies that are owned by, so they can systematically go through any company that is Chinese owned and say that they're no longer allowed.
And the big
So
concern
it's
is that the Chinese
centered on
military has
ByteDance.
a lot of fingers in this, and they're worried about them scraping data out of all these TikTok transactions and using it for nefarious purposes against governments. So it's a nation state kind of battle. behind
Right.
the
And we
scenes.
went through all of that a few weeks ago when we were talking
makes
about the
sense.
law, but I
Right.
did not understand that it was abroad, any Chinese company. So does that mean there's a
It's
lot
any-
of things that have shut
It's
down?
actually, yeah, it's any international company. So while TikTok and ByteDance shut down right away because they were very specifically named, it's actually a broad enough law that they could then just start saying, well, no red note, well, no this, because the Chinese owned companies have to have kind of a golden seat, and that golden seat is the government on their board. So that's what they're really talking about. It's more than just, I think what's gotten lost for consumers and for users is they're like, hey, what do I care if my data's out there? And I kind of go that way too. You're not going to get very much out of my data, to be honest with you. But it's really that other piece of it, because at any point, because they're part ownership, this very tiny amount, so they've now made the law itself is kind of broad. It's centered around TikTok, but it's actually written in such a way that they could come back and enforce it on any international company that has.
Wasn't there also a
government
subtext in the
company.
last couple of? There was a subtext in the last couple of days that the algorithm, though, somehow was not part of this deal, and that everybody is concerned because the Chinese were going to sell the company, but they weren't going to sell the algorithm or access to
That's
the
correct.
algorithm,
That's
which
correct.
is a whole
Yeah.
different ball of concern.
And that really prevented any American operation acquiring it because they wanted the algorithm. They did not
That's
want
the
the,
point,
customers.
yeah.
And that,
But didn't
I just want to
President
put
Trump
an asterisk in
cancel-
this. No. No, he didn't. He just delayed it. I'm
Right.
going to put a little asterisk on this. Everybody was supposedly running to RedNote. Anybody who actually speaks Chinese can read those characters. And all of us here are old enough to know that Mao's book was the Little Red
On
Book.
the red book.
Yeah.
And that's what RedNote translated as. So we call it RedNote, but over in China, it's the Little Red
Right.
Book.
Right.
It's actually owned by the government, not
Yeah, it
ByteDance
doesn't
or any
actually
other
mean red
company.
notes. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I will say this. Can I just say how fascinating it was when it shut down? Because like
Mhm.
I was on my TikTok and it started to just glimmer away. and at different times, people got like this message that said, sorry, because of your government, we're not going to you don't have access anymore. So I was waiting for that little thing to come up. Mine just kind of glimmered to a stop and then went away. But here's something really interesting. When it came back up again, my favorite pastime was going through all of the Americans are away, and everybody had a lot to say, some of which I agreed with, which was great. But one of the things that I thought was really fascinating, which I don't believe Americans really quite understood, is their content was still in people's feeds. People could still interact with their content, and they were just ghosts. So I think that's really interesting that hasn't been talked about, is that we shut down, but your content was still out there. And they sent us in that link, it said, hey, if you want to download your content, you can follow here, which I have no content up there, but I followed and it went to nowhere. So that's also a really interesting thing for people to know, is that, yeah, you couldn't get to it, but guess what? Everybody else could get to your content. They could interact with you, and you had absolutely no control over what was now out in the world, which I think is really interesting. You probably didn't get the notice
because you don't contribute, right? Anybody who was regularly contributing probably got the note.
But I'll tell you what,
the other big screens
I did get the notice later.
The other big screens was from the content creators, because there were people making money off of these services.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it. And they went ballistic because you're cutting off their income source. Right. And I'm sure for some of them, this was their livelihood. So it wasn't like just the kids who are watching and putting TikTok fun videos on there. Oh, I can't get to my, cat videos or whatever. It was this, oh my gosh, I'm suddenly not making a penny
and you know
today,
what, Bill?
And I was yesterday.
Well, and the idea that your content is still out there, that you are the creator of, is really, I think, something that needs to be talked about a little bit more,
you know what,
too,
Tamara?
because then that really does change the game.
Let me just play devil's advocate, because the only thing that my daughters cared about was that their content was still there. They were terrified that when TikTok went dark, that they were going to lose everything that they had ever posted. So they don't actually care.
Well, that assumes that the Chinese government doesn't want that information, right? They want to keep that stuff.
But there's two pieces to it, though. One is the content being in like your little private area, and the other is that your content is out for someone else to be able to take, because it's in the algorithm and the feed that you didn't realize. And I would venture to guess that most Americans did not realize that their content was continuing to be played to other countries without them there.
I'm not sure that anyone even cared.
That's my point.
It's also my major concern with the subscription services is that in essence, you're putting your work up on a subscription services. And in most cases, terms of service, if you stop paying for any reason, you lose access to your own intellectual property. And that's always bothered me more than anything else about the subscription model. Yep. I don't want somebody to be able to cut me off from control of what I have created and put there for you to make money off of. That seems usury to me.
Speaking of cutting off, tech industrial complex. The problem with these news stories is that all of them deserve an entire hour. So President Biden, in his outgoing speech, talked about what he feared, a tech industrial complex. Excuse me. And it didn't take long for us to sort of see that in some ways in action when we looked at the dais at President Trump's inauguration. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, Sundar Pichai, Xiao Chu, the TikTok CEO, interestingly, was there. So I'm curious what you all make of this. This is, of course, a hearkening back to this idea of the military-industrial complex. But do we need to be afraid of we've talked a lot about Elon Musk, but writ large, these tech giants, are these folks to be afraid of? Do they have too much power? What should our relationship with them, what should America's relationship with them be?
Today's railroad barons.
Yes.
Say, Dave, hold on one second. Dave and then Lois. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, these are the railroad barons of all yesteryear, and the New Deal and all that was having to. The whole thing of monopoly control comes out of the early days of railroad in America. It was run, and they could decide where the towns went. They could decide who owned the water. And here in Canada, the railroads still own all the property that their tracks run on. You can't build a building across it. You can't buy it off them. It's not even government owned. They're actually more powerful than the government. So, not that we have a big, huge tech sector here since the iPhone came out, but BlackBerry was a significant contributor in policy around here.
And to me, the difference between opt-in processes and opt-out, I think, is one of the most powerful forces that a lot of people do not pay much attention to. When you switch somebody from you are going to be subscribed to something or you're going to be doing something, and an inaction continues charging and commerce, as opposed to I'm making a decision to go to a store and buy a thing, that is incredibly powerful. And so when you've got all these huge tech companies looking to push content at you constantly and get you into models where you are constantly being microcharged for something, it really does shift economic power pretty substantially away from consumers and toward whoever controls the content distribution network. So it's something that I think about a lot before I sign on any bottom line about anything that's going to be persistent.
We have had for many, many, many years giant companies that are monopolistic, even though the government didn't say, oh, that's a monopoly, we have to do something about that. So should we be afraid of these folks? Yes. We should have been afraid of these folks for a long time. Is there anything we can do about them? No. They own what they own, and I can't make them not own what they own. All I can control is what I do, and I can look for places where I find people who take care of people rather than people who are just in it for the money. So that means that I'm probably going to shop local a lot, means that I may have to pay a little bit more money to get what I want. But if I have enough resources that I can do that, then I could make that kind of a choice. If I had no money, then I would have to go with the lowest bidder.
Well, there's the old decision about whether
play...
it's... Oh, go. Dahmer.
No, go ahead. You got it.
Well, I was just going to say, is this a little bit like the phone company and other utilities? I know Alex has talked occasionally on the big show about, is there something about the internet, about access and information pass along that is so critical to human life now and in the future that in order to make that something that everybody doesn't have relatively equivalent access to, and this may be a spinoff into net neutrality and things like that, it's going to be increasingly important. And what we're going through right now, I think, is that shakeout.
So you're saying that these tech moguls may either themselves or in the tools that they create and wield create another stratification within society of those who have access and those who don't.
Tiered information status, whether are you part of a company that has full-scale access to the webs and all the chat, generative tools and all the large language models and the rest of that, and that people on the lower end of society will simply be fed scraps of that in the interests of people who are sucking up all the bandwidth in order to leverage all of these tiny micro transactions into astonishing wealth.
You know what that reminds me of?
Tamara, she had her.
I know.
Yeah. Just real quick, in poorer countries, they have a slimmed down version of the internet. So because they don't have the bandwidth for all the rich graphical whatever, and so you're just reminding me of that. They kind of have the poor person's version of, and we're the ones eating up all the bandwidth. Sorry, Tamara.
No, I was going to say yes to all of that, and it's playing the opposite side of that. isn't that current? I mean, that's because we could say that about anything. We could say that about the tech industry. We can say that about the fact that only 4 major companies control the food that we eat, control the meat that we have in our stores. So we can say that about the conversation about big business and the little guy is a conversation that can be had in any industry. The opposite side of that, and I'm going out on a limb, not defending, but also saying, if you are one of the tech industry people, of course you go, right? Because that is the cost of doing business. If they want to continue to do business with someone who is holding the strings of whether or not they can do business, you are part of that group, right? I'm not agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. I'm just saying that there's no way you say no to that invitation.
Right.
If you have an interest in your company.
So back in the 90s, when the internet was young, there were a lot of startup companies that were internet connections. In fact, I was part of the mother.com here in our area. And one of the things that I think we should talk about in another show, perhaps, is that there are a lot of people, not a huge percentage, but still a lot of people whose information is not available on the internet because it's being blocked intentionally by some of the large companies. And whether that means if your website is on one of these small little mom and pop internet service providers, it may be that, oh, well, nobody on this service can see it. And we've seen that over the years.
We have.
Are there choke points and who controls them? Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
Well, I just wonder, are there choke points that, we talked and laughed a little about it, about somebody taking the big knife switch and turning off TikTok for the point, to make a point. What are those choke points, and is anybody aware of them really? I mean, I know some people who are pretty smart on the web stuff, but it's so complicated and so, I just wonder, like in the old switching yards where all the trains came together in one place, are there equivalent places on the internet, or is it so diverse that no matter how you cut off one, somebody else can get around you by turning on another one? I'm ignorant of that level of network topology to understand whether or not those nodes work.
Let me just bring, before we move forward, I just want to bring in, hold on one second, Dave. I just want to bring in a really important question that just came in from the internet. Which is specifically for you, Bill. Who is this new casual Bill?
My wife told me when I was putting on something other than a black T-shirt today, she said, somebody's going to notice. because I have done, I think, pretty close to 1,000 shows on office hours. And very early, I realized that I wasn't going to put the burden on my wife to try to clothe me differently and constantly do laundry. So I said, I'm going to go buy a dozen or 24 black T-shirts, and I'm just going to make that my standard. And that way she only has one load of laundry to do. And so I'm sorry to disappoint you.
I love it.
Well, it's a good color for you, Bill. It's a very good color.
Thank you.
And
Wait,
can
Lois,
we ask?
Lois, hold on. I got to give Dave the last word on this, and then we got one more story, and then we got to get to the main thing. Go, Dave.
Yeah, all of this talk reminds me of the times when cities themselves wanted to put in their own internet. And somebody got the power to say, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And cities have legal power. How come they succumb to the corporations who said, oh, no, we'll provide it to you? I was actually part of a cable company years back, actually late 80s, and they went to Colorado to let them do their cable for them. A Canadian company was going to go to Colorado and put cable in because the city councils decided who gets the contract. Here in Canada, we have a national body that decides that, not an FCC, but a radio and television commission that says you get a license and you get a license and all that. And then they're accountable for it. Well, while I was down there, they were thinking of putting internet in, and somebody came along and said, no, you can't do that. Why does that happen in America? Why is it that you can have $15 a month internet at a gigabyte in the Netherlands, but not in Chicago?
It's our system. That's how it works. I've always thought there was three tensions in the U.S. in terms of, we are a capitalist country. So you've got these big corporations. You've got the government, and then you've got the citizenry. And those are kind of the three big pillars of things. If any one of those legs gets soft and doesn't do its job,
it tips over. Yeah.
tip over. And it's
a
simple
three-legged
as
stool.
that.
Yeah. We'll move on.
All right,
Hey,
my
David,
friends.
what is Stargate anyway?
Stargate. So 2 days ago.
This is great.
This is great.
Yeah.
2 days ago, President Trump had a big announcement with the CEO of OpenAI, with the CEO of SoftBank, and with Larry Ellison, formerly of Google. And they announced Stargate.
And Oracle.
And and Oracle. They announced a $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure. This is exactly what you were talking about, Bill, right? In AI infrastructure over the next 4 years, starting with $100 billion immediately. They're going to be building data centers. I don't know. I mean,
not allowed to put solar panels aren't going to be allowed on top because they're going to get rid of those.
Is this government money that is being spent? My money?
Yeah.
Well,
let's not get too far into the politics here, but the taxes collected by your government, what they get from your pocket is a pittance compared to what they get international for trade, for manufacturing taxes, for sales taxes. There's lots of other taxes out there than just the personal income tax. So it's not all your money. It's major corporations.
But you had this, he listed all these people who are going to be involved in
so
it.
the funders,
are they putting in money
Yes.
or is the money coming from the
they also
government?
came to the
David?
table with money.
Yes, and so SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, MGX. SoftBank and OpenAI are the lead partners. SoftBank has financial responsibility. OpenAI has operational responsibility. And Masayoshi Son, who is from SoftBank, I believe, will be the chairman of this. Now, the reason I said yes and yes, Lois, is because SoftBank has said they're going to invest this money, and others have said they don't have anywhere near that amount of money to invest in this right now. So we'll have to see what actually comes of it. But it does go back to, Bill, what you raised before, which is that the pace at which we're moving, as exciting as it is going to require tremendous infrastructure. And look, I'm no fan of the present government, but someone seems to recognize that. And making
when the
an
data
investment
starts
of any
spilling from the
size is a
pipes,
start.
somebody's got to clean it up. So I think when those pipes start spilling data and there's big pools of data in somebody's yard, somebody's got to come and pick it up. Just tell you.
Yeah.
We have laws about cleaning up your mess. We should have data laws about what impact it's having on people. And if it is a detrimental impact, such as a food desert kind of thing, where you can't get your internet, you can't apply for a job unless you have an address. I cannot tell you the number of people in my family who don't use a phone much. And the bank wants them to get a message to confirm who they are on a phone. They want them to pay for that. And today I was looking at my bank telling me that I have to have Google authentication in order to second factor my bank. It's $99. Why am I paying that? You're the guys who want to put in the second factor. So
have you tried to go into a brick and mortar bank lately? Has anybody done that?
I have. Yes.
Have you been? So you've been there in the last I don't think I've been in a physical bank in a year.
Yeah.
And my wife probably hasn't been in a physical bank in a year.
I agree.
And if you ask to go to the bank, they won't want to make an appointment because they want to make sure that they're staffed because they're not open regular hours anymore. And I don't know if it's true everywhere else, but in San Diego here, half of them are gone now.
And you may as well put your money
ATM.
in Switzerland because it's very easy to bank out of Switzerland. Why are you down the street? If you're going to be treated that way there, why not move it all to Switzerland where there is no interest rate?
The whole banking industry is just really in a massive transformation.
Okay.
Have all my
And
checks
the
up to
high
Switzerland.
interest
Yeah.
banks.
Our credit union is still fine. Okay.
I'm a
Let's
credit
talk
union
about
guy, too.
something.
There is, by the way, although I just want to say that if you can find those small banks, those credit unions, there's really something quite magical about working with them.
They have human beings who are older than 23 inside the bank working.
Right.
One little note: our union has all the languages that are spoken in the bank. There's 15
that's
languages
nice.
Oh,
they
wow.
speak in the bank.
In my temple, we have a number of different accounts, bank accounts, and some of them we have with the big banks, but our primary operating account is with just a small regional bank. And it's such a joy to deal with them and to work with them. And they don't have all the bells and whistles, but
tech and money, we'll do that one another time. Yes.
And these are the folks who found when someone was coming in and trying to get into our accounts and things, they proactively took care of us.
Right.
And we didn't have to go and yell or anything. They just go, by the way, Lois, Jim, there's this problem. Come in, we'll take it.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of workplaces, that was a terrible transition. Speaking of workplaces, let's talk a little bit about how technology has impacted the workplace. The big news about this in the past day or so is that President Trump has ordered that all federal employees, I think it's in the next 10 days or so, must return to work full time. No more remote work for all federal employees. Now, I don't know. I have no idea how many people that affects. I do know that there's a lovely woman who is a part of my community who I was just having a conversation with her. She is an accountant. She works for a company that is down in a schlep away. It's about an hour away. And she is deciding right now if she wants to continue there because they are now requiring her to go into work. So there's that piece of it. There's the loss of jobs that AI and technology may be bringing about. So let's talk about some of this. Any initial takes before I get into some questions? Any initial takes or overarching ideas? Lois, over to you.
Well, I wanted to clarify that we're talking about big places. We're talking about corporations. We're talking about industries. We're talking about manufacturing plants. We're not talking about mom and pop stores. We're not talking about individual entrepreneurs.
I'm
so
not
just
sure
to
I
be
agree.
clear what our topic
I'm
is.
not sure I agree. I mean, look at what Amazon did to the mom and pop stores. Look at what what technology ordering online, how that affected some of the small
But
businesses.
what we're talking about tonight and the
No,
articles that you gave us to read are all about big guys.
I'm not sure I agree.
But I think I agree. It both are impacted because especially I'm looking at the return to work because that is a huge thing for me in television. We were told 5 years ago, absolutely not. You cannot work from home. It's impossible. And then, of course, within a day, we all were working from home. And now a couple things are happening. Like Disney, I know, is making people not only work from the office part-time, at least hybrid, but now they're going to be making people only be in Los Angeles County. So that changes a shift in who they're able to work in. So I just rolled off of a show that was based in amazing company that was based in Austin, Texas. We were 100% remote. And I don't think that company will ever go back. And it was amazing to be able to work with artists in Brazil and, have kind of access. So I do think there's a big conversation. The bigger corporation conversations, I feel like they're partly real estate, but I think looking at how we've seen this last week, for example, what we were talking about before with big corporations, all the tech heads being at this, at the inauguration. I feel like that is what is happening. I know in our conversations, people are like, what about the little guy who isn't able to go into work? The truth is, they're not thinking about the little guy. They have the president and the economics department calling them going, hey, you not having your people in your big buildings is more than real estate. It is every little company that is on the 2 blocks where everybody used to get their lunch that are affected. So I do think that we are talking about big corporations, but they do 100% affect the smaller businesses that feed those corporations.
I think part of the story is just disruption. I can't ever remember seeing this much disruption of a scale that it is happening all around us and has been since the pandemic and even before that. And it's going to continue and it's going to accelerate. And disruption usually has a lot of displacement. There's a lot of people who are getting displaced out of what they've been doing for their whole careers, and they're not quite sure how to handle this displacement. The only thing that's keeping me with a little bit of a smile on my face is typically when disruption happens on a broad scale like this, there's also a lot of opportunity, because the old systems that have been in place for a long time and the old people who have been holding on to those things. And I kind of see what you're talking about, David, with this subject, as the people who want to go back are the people who had a really good situation in that office with personal contact with people. They if their MBA came from managing people in an office system and they studied that their whole life, they don't want that to go away. And it's the younger entrepreneurs who've grown up virtually who are more comfortable trying to run an operation that doesn't have a physical plant, and you can do the old saw of managing by wandering around and talking to people.
I was listening to
My father.
It's also economics.
Hold on one second. I was listening to a show the other day, and they were talking about how we all thought with the Industrial Revolution that we'd lose all of these jobs also. And that
Right.
didn't actually happen.
Absolutely.
The jobs changed, but we didn't have massive unemployment. Forgive me, I was not alive.
There were
back then.
periods of it, but it wasn't permanent. Yeah.
Right. And so I think there are some folks who are saying, let's all take a deep breath. This is not going to be it'll be disruptive, but it won't be destructive. I think those are two very
I wonder,
different
though, if
things.
the difference, David, is that there was a localization component about you worked in your neighborhood, you shopped in your neighborhood, and things like this, and that's what's being eroded underneath that. When you're competing
Right.
not with the people in your market for that job, but for the entire world for that online job.
Right.
Gotcha.
It's
Let me
a
go to Dave,
different
and then
game.
Tamara, and then Lois.
I was working late one night in the production studio, and it was like nearly midnight. And I went up to our offices, and I saw a light on down the hall. And I went and talked to the guy in the room. What are you doing here? He was our controller. Controllers are the guys who handle the daily work of the business. And he said, well, it's all about computers now. And I went, oh, yeah, well, computers are great. And he says, yeah, but, I used to do an annual report. Now I do a quarterly. And I'll bet you by the time I leave, they're doing it on an hourly basis.
Yeah.
And we have automation now that is following virtually a chart is happening in YouTube about audience levels, which is the revenue level. And we're finding all the businesses are doing this. Tamara, I don't know if theaters you're working with have a sort of attendance sort of chart as to how well they're doing on an hourly basis. Is anybody leaving or coming late because they weren't serious about it? I don't know
That's
those
me,
things.
the back.
But yeah, click, click, click. But the sense of it to me is that acceleration has created this urgency that isn't necessary. And that financing things, I mean, just the idea of Bitcoin is an experiment. It was never meant to be
Right.
currency. They wanted people to try it out, and they have a limit on how many coins they'll make, and then it'll be dead. They'll just turn it off. If you have, like Bill was saying, if you have any content in there, the wallets will disappear one day and we'll all be poor again. Now, I see that and I say, well, what's behind Bitcoin is something that can change the whole world, and it's blockchain. Blockchain is a way of brokering things. And brokering things is how a lot of people make their money. Insurance brokers, automobile brokers, even trading brokers for the market, and the banking brokers and all the rest. And if you eliminate those people all in the process, and it's a direct customer supplier relationship, there's no broker in the middle, the shipping companies will continue to operate. They'll still staff it, and maybe they'll have robot boats in the future and there'll be fewer people on board, but they have an opportunity to have a really perfect ledger for all their transactions, and AI is going to give it to us. Well, okay, so that's a great thing, but the downside is who benefits and who doesn't.
Tamara, before you go on,
I can bring even. Yeah.
I just want to say that devoid of funk on YouTube, he who pivots fastest profits most.
Right.
We have to be able to pivot.
But you can also
I
pivot
think-
out from under yourself. I mean, you can pivot so fast
Yeah.
that you lose track of where
That's
you were
true.
going. And that's what I worry about, that managing by metrics in the moment. there's a certain kind of decisions that keeps it going up, but they are not necessarily good long-term decisions. And you can end up going off the cliff really easy if that's the only management metric you pay attention to.
Tamara.
When I think about AI, and there are great things about it, it really reminds me to even a closer thing than Dave's example, which is email. When I started in television, email was really just kind of everybody was getting email, was moving from academic into kind of the norm of everyday things. Email was supposed to make things faster. It was going to give us a much, we were going to have more time in our day. And I don't know if anybody thinks that email is a less time in their day. In fact, now we if you take even like simple things like insurance companies, you used to call in your claim, then the claim person would do their part of it, then they would put it in an envelope and they'd send it to the major company, and then someone would do their part of it and send it back. And we had kind of time in between. And email took that time away. We didn't do less work. We're doing more work. And so there's a part of me that when I look at this AI, I think, what is it going to feel like in 20 years from now when we go, oh my goodness, like this was supposed to make my life easier and simpler and do more things. And in fact, now I'm doing, a million more things. And I think that Dave's example is perfect. It used to be that you do a quarterly, a yearly, a quarterly report. And those hourly reports means that someone is printing those reports, someone is running those reports, or that they're running automatically, but people are analyzing them. It opened up new jobs, but not necessarily better ones. And so that's when I look at AI and all of these things, I'm like, yes, they could drastically change the world. But I wonder what the part of it is going to be where we go, oh, that did not make my life easier.
Yeah. Lois.
So David talked about the really old, industrial revolution kind of change. And I want you to remember back when you've seen videos of those early car creators, and there was a line, and the car moved down and down and down, and each station there was a bunch of people that did things. Okay. Now, if you were to look at a car line now, instead of a bunch of people there would be robots doing the things. Okay. So there are less jobs of that type than there were. Similarly, when I was young, we had secretaries, and every executive had a secretary who would take dictation and write up the letters and do all the stuff.
Do the calendar, all that stuff, yeah.
And then when personal computers came out and people were supposed to do their own letters, and then email came out, and that really changed things.
And calendars.
But all of the people
booking
who
flights
were secretaries at that time suddenly weren't needed. Now, it's true that when some change happens, people who have the job that's being displaced lose their jobs, and more different jobs are created. But the question is, are the people who are losing the jobs able to pivot and take the new jobs? And that, I think, is more and more difficult. So I am not enthused about the manufacturing jobs that are being lost, or the informational jobs that are being lost.
Lois,
I'm not sure you lose so much as it just changes. Oh, go ahead, David.
Well, I just wanted to bring another aspect into this, and then please jump back in. I'm curious about what you just said and the shift in skills, in workplace skills. I'm starting a new school next year for an elementary school, and one of the things that I'm spending a tremendous amount of time.
You're going to grade 2? Is that what you're doing now?
I'm sorry?
You're starting a new school, grade 2? You're going to get new friends?
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
I feel left out for, I was bullied as a kid. It's a whole, that's for my therapist.
Please continue, David.
So, and I'm spending a tremendous amount of time thinking about what are the skills that we need to focus on that are going to be vital to these kids when they enter the workforce. So let's think of it in that way. So we have this shift coming, or it's already here and it's going to increase. What are the core skills that folks need when that shift comes to them, when they lose their job and they have to find something else? What's
flexibility?
Necessary?
Yeah, my answer would be
with
agility.
Flexibility.
Yeah.
Critical
Because
thinking.
you lose You lose slide rules, but you gain pocket calculators. You lose encyclopedias, but you gain Google. There, this flow of change is always happening, and that's what I think. I'm hoping that the next generation, we figure out some way to teach them that agility to say, when the game changes, and it's going to be changing, it's going to be cycling faster than it did for me or your grandfather. You have to be ready to look at least down far enough, like when you're driving, to see the potential accidents forming ahead of you.
Yeah. You have to see pattern recognition, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, William Gibson, for the
That's not what's valued. Look, in the
it isn't
information
sometimes,
you gave us,
but
David, right. And this is what's interesting. When I read some of the articles that we read, we're talking about how we're not interviewing people anymore. We're doing task-based interviews to check to see if someone's skill set was what they need. And that to me is dangerous. It's similar to we're teaching content in schools when content is freely available to students, and we really need to be shifting to teaching skills and research and figuring out how to determine information. But we are still looking at skills-based learning and skills-based or content-based, and even in interviewing, they're going to do a skills test to see if you fit the skills that they need right at this moment. If you are not someone who can adapt, then you will be laid off when they go to find someone who can do the other skills. So that adaptability is something that I think we need to value more, that we are not.
Tamara, when I'm hiring for this new job, I'm hiring teachers. And I'm working with a coach out in Hawaii who's done a lot of this work before. And we were developing the interview for the teachers. And instead of the traditional questions of, what's your resume and how would you do this? All the questions that we developed were all about inviting the person to show weakness, essentially, to show that they were vulnerable. Because we wanted to know if they saw in themselves the value of learning. And if they can see within themselves why it's important to keep learning, then they'll be able to pass that along to children.
And isn't it sad that we do so little social modeling of exactly what you're saying? When was the last time you saw a movie where the hero, the real transformation was them learning and being pushed out of their comfort zone, as opposed to, I know everything and I can figure out everything. I'm faster, smarter. I have a bigger gun than everybody else around here, so I win. End of story.
Yeah.
But we also have a generation coming up that is absolutely terrified of failure. They have been judged on every level. When I have an incoming group every year to my theater company, and we spend a lot of time on failure. We spend a lot of time saying, listen, your best goal here is to fail and fail spectacularly. We want you to go running into that with failure, because we're going to do that in front of you so we can show you where growth comes from. And I've had some people spectacularly fail, and we are able to go, hey, the ladder's over here, let us help you out. But that is something that is so, you can just see the fear on faces where they're like, I don't know how to fail. And that's one of the things that I think is vital, that we start teaching, not just kids, but adults, that failure is where growth comes from, period.
I had to hire a bunch of people.
Dave, hold on one second.
Let me major project. Yep.
Hold on 1 second.
So Tamara, I think I disagree with one of the things that you were talking about when you said you didn't like having someone do a practice, a test, a part of the interview showing that they knew what X, Y, or Z was and how to handle it. I think the problem is that so many people can write a great resume and not make it honest, so that you can say, okay, they've got this, this, and this, but they may not know what they say they know. So I think having someone show you what they know in at least one instance, I think that's a good thing.
I agree with that. I mean, and I'm in a portfolio-based industry where we have to not just show it in, we've got to show a vast schedule of work that you've done. So I agree with that. But when we're focusing on, can you type, for example, great. you can type. That used to be the typing test is what people used to take to get a job. And then when it became no longer necessary, then they were no longer part of the company. So if we're not investing in employees anymore, we're investing in employees for a skill that they might know that is small and narrow focus. So I agree that like how we're doing interviews is incredibly different. But I don't know if you've applied for a job recently, but it can go for 4 and 5 months at a time because of all of these interviews and skills and things like that. So I do think that you're right. We do have to find different ways of hiring people, but I also think that our value system of what we think is important has to be expanded.
Let me also
from being just skill based.
Dave, I'm coming right to you. I just want to bring in this comment because it's so important. And now we can't even see it. That's ridiculous. Come on, get bigger. It says, this is from Ashley Adav, the older workers suffer more when displaced as they have much more difficulty in getting a new job. And that's absolutely true. It's one thing to think about a young workforce that has that agility, has that flexibility. But when you're dealing with people who've had the same job for 30 years and they are experts in that job, to say to them, your job doesn't exist anymore, we're going to retrain
find a new
you.
one.
But they're also the most expensive workers you have in your, because they've been there for 30 years
Absolutely.
and they know what they do and they've had risen up through the ranks. And, what's easier, keeping 3 lower level employees or losing one expensive older employee who now is stuck out there without opportunity?
Yeah. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah. And that goes to a couple of things. The company's history is lost when the white collar guys disappear, and they'd made all the mistakes, and they now know what to do. When my father was starting out in accounting, he didn't know it all, and he was in a team of 20 guys, all with adding machines, and they worked together to solve problems. And then everybody learned it, not just the guy who solved the problem. Today we got MBAs running whole corporations, and they have a few flunkies, and those are the only guys who find out what happened or where it failed.
Yep.
The other thing I've noticed in hiring, and I've had to hire a lot of techs and graphic guys and animators and stuff for a major project with NATO, and they want to know where the rule book was. And I was going, we make it up as we go along, guys. They tell us what they want made, and then we figure out how to do it. And they went, oh, so I have to okay, all right. And they were, many of them were confused. The brilliant programmers were ready to go. They came in ready to do what they wanted. But some of the young guys coming out of college thought, well, when I get hired, they'll tell me how to do it.
When you say the rule book, can you expand on that? So people come in and...
Well, they want to participate, right? They want to be part of the process of the company. They don't want to just have a job. And then they want to know, okay, well, isn't there a rule book around here about how things work so I can study it up and be good at it? And I'm going, no.
Right.
Just be good at your job, impress Dave, and you'll advance.
Gotcha.
And what do you do when AI is starting to eat up the coding jobs? Those used to be the jobs at the top of the heap. You had to be extraordinarily talented.
We had very expensive animators.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're getting eaten up.
They built aircraft models and stuff. It was really complicated work. They all had to function as a real model, and they were brilliant. But, all I had to do was teach them lighting, and they looked great.
I attended a class today on AI in education, and it was primarily thinking about younger kids. But one of the things that Ted Dintersmith, I believe is his name, he wrote the book, What Schools Could Be, or What School Could Be. Really interesting guy. In any case, he said something that really struck me. He said, if you as a teacher give a test, an assessment that an AI can take and pass, the assessment probably wasn't worth giving. So my question is, does that also apply to our jobs? If an AI can do the job, does that mean that it's not worth us investing, that just let the AI do it and we should find other more perhaps creative work?
I'm struggling with this right now because I do a lot of audiobook narration and we can see these AI bots coming at us. And so I've been thinking a lot about what is it that we, the human performer, can do that these algorithms can't do. And I'm nowhere near getting the full answers, but it's an interesting thing to think about. I'm starting to think about what are their weaknesses and how can I exploit that? Because they're going to be coming so fast
That's
and
fascinating.
displace so much.
That's a heck of a
you have to-
strategy.
Yeah,
Dave,
you
it
got to
feels
figure
to
out
me-
what they can't do.
I mean, Bill, it feels to me like that shift with voices, for some reason, it feels to me like that happened overnight. I mean, I can distinctly remember
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe September or October when I was still listening to Siri's voice, which just grated at me and it was awful and it sounded
Right.
robotic. And then
Right.
all of a sudden, we're getting OpenAI and we're getting what the heck is it called? A Notebook LM with these real life, beautiful, natural voices, which are just amazing.
They are, and it's interesting to me because
And that was the basis of both
Hold on,
strikes.
Tamara, 1 second. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. So to me, I'm now putting voice work in classes. There are things that I don't care if AI does it. I don't care if it reads me the back of the cereal box, the ingredient list or whatever. That's fine. Now you get over into the creative arts and you get over into novels and poetry and things like that. And then suddenly the question is, where is the uncanny valley? Where does the algorithmic production of a human voice based on all this large language model fail to put into the performance the human connection that came from talented humans doing the work? And how long will it take? Will it take weeks or months or years or hopefully decades before something can generate the interaction between three characters and a dialogue scene? And an actor making a choice in one of those characters that truly influences and changes the flow of all three of the characters in that scene. Right now, that's still the province of humans, in my opinion. You're going to get a decent product out of the AI, but you're going to get magic, if you're lucky, out of the
Somebody
actors.
knows what they're doing. Yeah.
Right.
And the-
right.
I got to
Because
applaud you,
problem-
Bill. Last week, Bill made reference to Alan Rickman's quote, and I think that was a key moment last week for me. Yes.
Thank you for that.
Let me get Lois.
past my feed.
Lois and then Tamara, and then I want to bring in a comment from Mukana.
So, Bill, I think the biggest problem you have is not that the AI is going to get that much better, but that the listeners are going to get that much poorer in what they hear, that they aren't going to care or notice that it has more creativity, more emotional content. So I think that's going to be the big downfall, is people not caring.
Well, it's possible, but Rickman's point in this was that the transfer of knowledge through storytelling is about as old as the human race. That before colleges, before encyclopedia, before any of that, information got passed along. So the question, I guess, is there something deep in our DNA that values that human-to-human pass along storytelling connection at such a level that if they hit the uncanny valley for any reason, their doubts is sown and sprouts into disbelief? If that is true, then maybe there's hope for the poets and the narrators.
I think there is. I think there is hope. One of the things I'm aware of is that almost every new technology creates a flip, and the flip reclaims an old art. We're moving into a verbal culture. I drive in a car and there are no words on the signs anymore. I don't rely on a navigation tool unless I'm in a foreign city, and I'm able to get around Chicago without knowing anything about Chicago. And I can navigate myself. I don't need a driver. So the sense of, advantage for this is that it's going to make some things better, and we'll still need that storytelling. Somebody's got to be able to tell the story.
Yeah.
But like the secretaries, you're not going to need legions of them. I'm sorry, but when
That's right.
all the executives can type and send their own emails out, the legions are going to diminish. And so
And
those
you
people,
and I were in a business that had teamwork, right? We had audio
Absolutely.
guys, video guys,
Right.
lighting guys,
Absolutely.
gaffers, and a cameraman, and then a guy called the director that nobody paid any attention to. But it was a gang operation, and it required a truck and all the rest. But now
Right.
it's a one-man show.
Yeah, Tamara,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, it can be,
Hold
although
on,
I
Bill,
saw a
one
little
second.
flip
Let me get
back
Tamara
to
in.
Teams. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
That's a spin or a twist.
No,
Yeah.
no, I think speaking off of what we've been talking about, for me in theater, when COVID happened, the theater community really kind of came together in a digital space, and people were coming to me all the time going, is theater dead? Are people never going to come back? And like the young people were upset. I had a series of daily kind of chats with different people in different levels of the community. Ultimately, my answer to them was no, it's not going to go away, because the thing that got most of us into theater was the fact that we were the geeky kid who didn't really fit in anywhere, and we stumbled in somewhere into that community of artists, and we suddenly found a place. And I think that's true of an audience as well. People who go to the theater or do artistic things or look for story are in constant need of that kind of community. And if you look at the things that are coming into the foray. If you look at like TikTok, essentially, it started out with people kind of doing dances and silly stuff. But at the core of what TikTok is it is a storytelling medium. Someone puts their phone up and they tell their story, and other people engage in it. And I feel like the fact that people are continuing to engage in people's story is a real green flag. And, to say that that is going to drive who we are as humans, is that we are going to be constantly in search of not just story, but personal stories. And I think that will prevail. It may look different in a lot of ways. And I do think that, yeah, some people are not going to be in their jobs, but I have a feeling that people who are good at their jobs are going to rise to the top, and more people coming in are also going to come into that thing. So I don't think storytelling is dead yet, even with all of the, I think we'll still need that.
And experiences. Yeah.
So I just want to bring into the conversation Brody, who's watching on YouTube and over in Mukana, said that in my federal workplace, the return to work mandate seems especially problematic for parents and caregivers. One of the issues, which is no one's fault, but became accustomed to and somewhat comfortable with the fact that we might not have to go to work. Some of us, not everyone. A lot of people did have to go to work every single day, but many of us got comfortable with the idea that we don't have to go to work every day, and so we can take care of our children, save money on childcare, a number of different things. And it's quite a shock to the system, I think, to be told that's over. You have to all go back to work now.
It's a shock to young people as well, because they started their jobs in a digital space, and now we're saying return to work, and they're saying, wait a minute, you've now reduced my salary. Because those of us who just went to work, we took the cost of getting to work as part of just how life worked. Right. That I was going that was going to be a cost for me. So that is one of the real arguments too for younger people who are like, wait a minute, I'm not living in a very expensive city. I'm able to live outside of that. Then you want me to go there and you want me to drive and pay that cost. This money that you've been offering me for that job is now reduced. So I think that we're seeing it in all generations.
Lois, go ahead.
One of the things that we haven't talked about today, which I think is kind of important, is how the technology is affecting people's evaluations. So if you have a digital supervisor who's watching your work and going, okay, they took a minute off there, they took this, and you're constantly being, monitored, that digital monitoring affects how people appreciate or don't appreciate their job, how much stress they're under. And, I think that's a problem. So I don't know if we have time to talk about that, but digital monitoring, man.
It's a real thing. My eldest daughter, her company, she works in she is the only person, she represents her company down here in Florida, and they recently got her an iPad. And part of the purpose of the iPad was, and they told her this, was so that we can see what you're working on. It made her terribly uncomfortable. Terribly uncomfortable. Really
it makes you value, though, when you have incredibly good people who are in management. I worked for a company that did track in terms of, our time in and out. And so if you were a freelance employee, that's how they could tell. So you would go in and into the little payment thing and say, I've come in at this time and I didn't come in at this time. But I will tell you, the thing that I loved about that company was the humanity of the way they operated. Even when they did their HR presentation, they're like, Tamara, we're going to talk to you about benefits, but the thing we really want to talk to you is about our culture. And it has changed everything about when I'm looking for a new job. I would do anything for them. I'd be a PA for them in a second because their humanity was above all. Someone would say, oh, I've got to go pick my kid up. And they'd be like, drive safe. That's it. Drive safe. And that is not the case in many places. And I think you're going to see generations of people as we're coming up and we're wrestling with, do I want to drive to work? Do I want to do this? Start saying, these are my priorities, and my priorities are being able to be able to pick my kids up from work, from school. It's being able to take care of my parents, or it is, being able to be in a company that values me as a human. And I think that those things are going to be things that are more and more important to us.
I want to bring in a comment from Chris Clark, who is listening. And again, I apologize, it's so small. I really got to figure out comments in Ecamm. It's the one thing of Ecamm I have not figured out yet how to get comments to work properly. But I'll read it for you. He says, beautiful conversation, oral storytelling. This is going back to, Bill, what you were talking about. Oral storytelling is as old as language. Perhaps is the spark and driver of the development of more and more elaborate languages. He then goes on to say, everyone has a story. The great communities are the ones that respect and invite all member stories, not exclusively the stories of the priests and shamans. So in that respect, it's this what I've sometimes talked about, the democratization, that what we're seeing now is this grand democratization, because everybody could potentially be a voiceover actor. Everyone could potentially tell their story.
Absolutely.
Everyone could potentially be a producer or director. And that's incredibly powerful. And so I don't want to take away from the pain that we are seeing in some of these workplace challenges, but there is a flip side to the way technology has allowed.
It puts a huge burden on personal curation, because you can get more stories than anyone could listen in 100 lifetimes right now on any of the social media platforms. So the question is, how do you not miss critical conversations or critical ideas that could be important to you and change your life in this maelstrom of data and thoughts and performance?
I just tell my operator that I want this kind of conversation.
Yeah, well, will ChatGPT pick the right podcast for you or whatever
That's right.
the next?
Yeah.
So we need to have a forum of human beings, not AI,
Yes.
to read each other's works, and they exist.
Well, that used to be editors and critics and people like that, but they have been flipped pretty substantially into being untrustworthy agents by, I think, a lot of people
By pandering,
who
yeah.
want gatekeepers.
You know what's interesting? You're reminding me about the change that Facebook made with not having fact checkers. A lot of that fact checking was done using automation, and they're changing to, what are they calling it? Community notes, I think, which is
community notes.
Yeah, which is the X model, which again is allowing us to be the curators of our own. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a different.
Because my whole career, I've had editors, or I had, I wrote a column for about 10 years, and I had editors, and then the editors had bosses, and everybody vetted everything going through, and you had fact checkers and this whole team that if you made a functional error in your writing, they would correct it, or at least let you know and have a conversation with you about why you're off. But now you just write and you hit post.
Yeah.
And there's nobody.
Right.
And then, if you get into the position where you argue about the fact that your falsehood is not a falsehood anymore, we're seeing that.
Who's helping? Yeah.
Yeah, whose facts work.
Right. So we're reaching the end here. Just another minute or so, but I wanted to raise one other idea, and that is the idea of, forgive me, Simon Sinek, for quoting you, but start with why. And I want to talk about purpose for a moment, because I think that one of the things that could come from this is that people will be forced to find jobs that have purpose. Because the menial jobs, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but the repetitive menial jobs will be done by robots and by AI. And what we will be left with is the creative work and the thoughtful work and the profound work that all
Or
of
being
us
out
are.
of work. Being
No,
out of work.
I'm not. But again, I'm not sure that that's the inevitable result here, Lois. I think that
No, you named a bunch of possibilities,
Yeah.
yes? And being idle is another possibility. People who
yes,
can't figure out how
You're
to
right.
get something to do, and they're just going to be out of luck and out
Thank
of
you.
work and
Yes.
out of a house, probably.
You know what? That's so important.
But that
I'm
speaks
so
to
glad
the
that you
nature
said
of
that.
how work is changing.
Mhm.
That's speaking to how the nature of how work is changing. The younger generation coming in is almost demanding that their work be something that has purpose to them. So that's one of the conflicts we're seeing between the 4 generations that are in the workplace, where people are like, you just come in and you do the job and then you go up the ladder, and kids are coming in saying, actually, I want to have purpose from the get-go. So you're really seeing a shift in expectations of jobs and what jobs should be and shouldn't be. And there's good and bad in that. I'm not taking a side either way, but we are seeing a younger generation come in and say, you know what, I actually don't want to do these jobs. And in fact, those jobs that AI might take over, the kids coming in don't want to do that. They want to know that their work matters and that it has meaning. That is the world that they've grown up in. So I think that's a conflict that we're kind of wrestling through it, because we all entered the workforce at different times, and we have different ideas of what hard work looks like and what meaningful work looks like. And that, some of us are like, well, you pay your dues and then you get to be meaningful. And so I think that that's a conversation that we're having in the real world, that AI may in fact solve some of that for some of the younger kids coming in.
It could be.
It's true for
then
us. I
you
wonder if
have-
it's true for the kids today, though. And I say that because the teens that I know and post-teens, I mean, if you were 14 to 17 when the pandemic hit, you haven't had any opportunity to go into a workplace and learn those skills. You didn't have, the paper route I had as a young man to start to learn discipline in the workplace, they've been gone forever. They don't let kids drive a bicycle around neighborhoods and throw papers on doorsteps.
Right.
It just doesn't exist.
But it's crazy
conflict.
because that's the expectation coming in. When I get kids coming in, like I called my producing partner and said, hey, I need someone to help me with a digital event on Sunday. And he goes, oh, they don't work nights and weekends. And I said, they're theater majors. They chose wrong. Like literally they chose badly. Right. But the truth is, and we've also had, he's like, oh, can you give, so-and-so someone something to do? Because she only wants to do producing things. And you're right, Bill, they haven't had the experience. But for me as a manager, I now have to give them the experience while also honoring this ideology that they have, and that's a struggle that we're seeing in the workforce with
you're a
younger
small part of it.
There's a-
That's a
there's a
generation out
huge-
there.
Lois, go ahead.
That's a
Absolutely.
huge conflict with large corporations. They don't care what the young people
Absolutely.
want. They just go, okay, we need to do this, this, and this, find somebody to do it. And, I see a big conflict
And
there.
Gen Z is being fired and not hired at alarmingly large rates. They're large corporations who are now saying, I will not hire college students because they don't fit that value system. So it's a real struggle in big organizations and little organizations of like, how are we going to, what is work going to look like? How will it look in terms of what your jobs will be? And I think that we're kind of in this shift in the way that, moving everything to digital computers was, that there's
It's not just us. It's a global challenge.
Yeah.
Every
Very
culture
It's a global
is going through
challenge.
exactly the same thing.
Very much
And
so.
it sounds
Absolutely.
like
It's not
people
any
here
one
are
culture.
sounds like people here are saying that the options for work are being greatly reduced, so that you've got to do X, Y, or Z, rather than having broader options and being able to do other things.
That's not
We
what
may
I'm
have
saying.
Yeah, I think that's
generations.
true.
Lois,
We have generations of kids.
I would phrase it differently. I would say we don't even know what the options are going to be. We don't even, we can't even imagine what future work is going to look like right now. And that's scary. And it's okay to honor that fear because it's real. I don't think that technologies impact on the workforce will be the end of the workforce. I think it will be a radically different
Right.
one.
I don't either.
And we just don't know what it looks like yet. There's one other thing that I know, and that is that for the four of you and anyone else who's watching this later, you must read the comments in the YouTube, because there's such amazing, and I wanted to bring them all in, but there's such amazing, beautiful, meaningful conversations happening. Thank you to Ash and Devoid of Funk and Peter and everyone who's participating, Chris, everyone who's participating over there. Really, really beautiful conversations. And I also want to thank all of you. It's 10:15 my time. I got to go to bed. Dave and Lois and Tamara, thank you so much. Bill, what a joy to have you here. Please, please, please come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Be a regular. Be a regular.
Yes, be a regular. Absolutely.
I'll ask my wife.
Ask the wife.
Thank you.
And if anyone else wants to join us, just hit me up over in Discord. Go over to therundown.show. You can access our Discord there, the YouTube, and let me know you'd like to join us. Peter, you love watching guitar unboxing videos. Okay.
Yay.
I love playing guitar. I don't never keep it in a box, but
That's Peter in New Zealand, yeah.
Peter in New Zealand. Good to see you. Ash, thank you so much. Devoid of Funk, and all of you. Really, I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. Thank you for watching The Rundown. We'll see you next week. Take care.